G'day folks. Thought I might try a little bit of a video experiment to introduce to you. My most recent layout production has been a collaborative effort with a number of folk, particularly my sister. This is titled A Navigator's Journey, and this is a representation of the text, illustrations and photographs that our father produced during his overseas deployment 1944-1945 during the Second World War, and to some extent ultimately being assigned to Bomber Command in the UK and conducting operations, heavy bomber operations into Europe. My involvement commenced probably, I think it was late 2012. It's now April 2019, and Yahoo, the thing has finally been produced and printed. My sister Sally's involvement went back many years prior to that. An extraordinary task in transcribing more than 80,000 handwritten words from two sources of letters and Dad's handwritten diaries for those couple of years while he was deployed overseas. And then after that, editing that down to probably a little bit more than 50,000 words, which appear in this book, and arranging them in a chronological sequence so that the book made sense, or the book makes sense to the reader. For me, the challenge came when this is not like your typical photo book. All the main driver of the production is probably fair enough to say, would be the text, and the text source. The text came through three sources: the letters to Dad's parents, to his sweetheart at the time, who later became his wife and our mother, and his diary accounts, which to a large extent were written to himself. The editorial process involved selecting from those three sources in a chronological fashion in order to tell the story from departure, deployment, experiences overseas, and eventual return. We made a conscious decision fairly early on not to bring in any real narrative, certainly text, and definitely photographic and illustrative content from us. So this is all first-hand accounts. However, because to some extent piecemeal, because it's a letter here, a letter there, a diary account here, a diary account there, we need to present these in some way that made sense to the reader. The solution we came up with was, I hope you can see it here, to reproduce in the background, excuse me, peeping around the camera guys, some of the actual aerograms, which was the way of communicating by surface mail in those days, and then subsequently identifying the sources that will come in close, a little icon for letters to Beryl, and a little icon for letters to his parents, and was effectively a typographical solution to represent the excerpts that we selected from his diary. Probably the other main layout challenge for me was unlike a photo book where, fairly typically you'll have front matter, text essay, and then a whole series of images presented in a fairly celebratory fashion, dare I say, as often a full-size image with a minimal or occasionally a longer form caption. And perhaps you may even arrange those into chapters. But structurally, a fairly simple thing to put together. However, here was obvious that the visual material that Dad had produced, his photographs and his illustrations, needed to be placed within the context of the narrative that he'd established through his writings, and so we find that they are peppered through the text, which I've shown that up from before, so I won't repeat myself, in ways and placed in ways that makes sense within the text that you're reading. So if he's visiting people or staying with people that he's billeted with, then those photographs that relate to that are put there. If there's stories of action or whatever's going on in the war, then similarly they'd be placed there. In terms of a design solution, went for something that's sort of more modest in size, not quite diary size, but not a celebratory coffee table book, to try and get that sense of the personal connection that is very, very evident in the text when one reads it. It's printed on an uncoated paper, so it has the visual, the textural feel, the physical feel that you get from uncoated paper, as distinct from coated paper, which tends to be the natural selection of photographers that will give you a more optimum reproduction quality for your photographs. The book also contains a number of hand-drawn maps. Naturally enough, Dad being a navigator and a fairly assiduous documenter of things, not just from his personal experience, but beyond that, they form an important part, and certainly as a first-hand account of the experience of Second World War service people are quite important documents to have, or under the one cover. The book concludes, I think, quite nicely with the story of a message in a bottle that he and a few of his mates threw overseas from the ship that was bringing them ultimately back home, back to Australia, and a photograph of Mum and Dad's wedding day, which is kind of a nice way to conclude a book which I think at its heart is ultimately a love story. Thanks for watching.